often a single nucleon or single valence nucleon determines all of the nuclear properties. In that case, we can say that I will be equal to J. Okay. So, in other cases, it may be necessary to consider, let us say, 2 valence particles. So, in this case, we can say that I will be equal to J1 plus J2. And several different resultant values of I are then possible, right? So, there can be different scenarios. Let us see what are the possible scenarios we can have. So, sometimes the odd particle and the remaining case of nucleons, remaining core each contribute to the angular momentum with I is equal to J particle plus J core. Now, we can consider a particular direction, let us say the z direction, and then we can impose a restriction on the allowed values of I considering the z components of the individual nucleons, right. So, an important restriction on the allowed values of I comes from considering the possible z values or z components of the individual components of the nucleons. of the individual nucleons. So, each J must have half integral values like and this is only possible if the Z components are corresponding and thus it is only possible Z components are likewise half integral. So, and so on. So, from here we can see that if we have an even number, right, we will have integral components, and if we have an odd number, we will have half integral components. So, we can summarize this and make a rule, right. So, if the number of nucleons is odd, okay, the total Z component will be half integral and so must the total I, and therefore, we have the rules odd A nuclei will have I is equal to half integral and even A nuclei will be integral. And therefore, by measuring the values of the nuclear spin, we can get an understanding of the nuclear structure. We can relate it to the internal structure of the nucleus based on this explanation. For example, we know that we have nuclei that are stable, we have nuclei that are radioactive, and we have nuclei that have an even number of Z, and we have nuclei that have an even number of neutrons. So, then we can relate the spin of these particles and try to understand the properties of these nuclei. And this can be used as an evidence for the nuclear pairing force that we also talked about in the previous classes, right. So, the nucleons couple together in spin pairs and they give a total I value that can be, you know, directly or indirectly observed. So, we have a corollary